Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at the Center for Leadership and Excellence and Empowerment. As you all know, today's session is based on publishing, and the topic is publishing in business and management, insights from the editor. So before we continue, I would just like to hand over to the Center Director, Professor Kristen Harrison, to just give us a word of introduction.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Can you all hear me? Good. Sorry, as you can see from the background, we had a guest speaking event at Birmingham, so I had to go for that clearly, and I thought I'll be able to get here before then. But of course, the train moved very well nowadays, so unfortunately, I'm is here today. Welcome to the Center for Leadership and Empowerment, and this is our maiden seminar, the first of many to come. I'd like to say thank you to everybody that has come here today to start the seminar. Of course, many thanks to Lawrence that is leading on this, and it's good to have everybody here today. Of course, we have our we have Dr. Chidozie Ume, who's going to be talking about, of course, publishing in business and management. But like I said, this is our maiden seminar, and we are hosting it by the Center for Leadership and Empowerment. The purpose of the center is to advance the insights about leadership and also empower people. We are passionate about empowering others, and we want to lead the discourse on leadership. And that's what we'll be doing all through in the next years to come. I have a fabulous team. As you can see, we have the likes of Lawrence, we have the likes of Carol, and we have several people involved in this center. So many of them I can't even mention, but we'll be running seminars, so watch this space. We'll be running a lot of seminars, hopefully by next.
West Coast service to Edinburgh. So
bear with me with train
Haymarket
noise at the background. But of course, we'll be running different seminars. You would get to follow us on Twitter, follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Facebook. You will get to hear the great things that we are doing. So thank you very much for being here today, and I'm sure that you would learn much more about leadership and also empowerment. So thank everyone for coming, and I would give back the hand to Lawrence that will continue with.
Thank you very much, Professor Harrison, for that introductory comment. Right, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we have not made provision for drinks and snacks, but hopefully we are all ready with our pens and papers for what I believe is going to be an insightful, thought-provoking, eye-opening, and an inspirational session with Dr. Chidozie Ume. Just to give you a little bit of intro, Dr. Chidozie Ume serves on the editorial board of Personnel Review as Special Issues Editor. He previously served as Assistant Editor of the journal. He is an Assistant Professor in Human Resource Management at the School for Business and Society, University of York, and Program Leader for MSc in HRM. He holds a PhD in Management from Queen Mary, University of London. Dr. Ume also is a Fellow of the Higher Education Academy and an Academic Associate of the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development, CIPD. With over a decade of industry experience, primarily in the banking sector, Dr. Ume research interest encompasses various areas, including general management, international management, strategic HRM, and organizational studies. He focuses on examining management practices within diverse contexts and their impact on sustainable development and social inequalities. Dr. Ume continues to publish in internationally renowned journals and actively collaborates on high-impact research projects. He is currently a co-investigator on 2 research projects funded by Leeds, Curriculum Santander Bank, and the Business in the Community Enterprise Rent a Car Foundation. His research has also received funding from the British Academy of Management, the Chartered Management Institute, and Money and Pension Services. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is my distinct pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Chidozie Ume to the virtual stage. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Lawrence is making me feel like a star. And making me feel like a star, but it's a pleasure to be here. I have been looking forward to this, and the things I want to share are quite, how do I say, they are quite personal. They're personal because of the journey that we're all in, a journey that I can identify with. It's a journey that makes demands of all of us. But for many of us, the idea of publishing is not just, it's not because it's required of us in our academic life, or it's not something that is connected to, say, an appraisal or performance management process. I think for many of us, it's something like, it's a passion. It's like a calling. It's that you have something to say, there's a story you want to tell, and that you feel it's beyond, it's not ideal for this story to be just for you. You want others to understand the story, to know the story. You want others to be informed about this story. And you feel that this story indeed can make a difference. It can make a difference in a field. It can solve a problem. Incidentally, in management and in business management, there's something we all call problematics. It's not enough to want to gain insight into something. It's not enough to want to tell people what you have seen. The task is on us to tell people what we have seen and why they should want to know. All right? And why they should want to know about what we have seen and what we know. So it's gone beyond now. You identify gaps, but that's not enough. You see things that are solutions to problems, and you try to publish this. You say, I have seen something that solves a need. I have discovered something that solves a need. And you are told, why should we be interested? Why should this appeal to our readership? Why should someone in New York want to know about something happening in Zimbabwe? And this is and why should we are an international journal? We are interested in international insights. We are interested in the global north as much as we're interested in the global south. But how can we generalize your findings? Some people have accused over and over again the publishing world of being very narrow. In other words, they are gatekeepers that determine what knowledge comes through, what we hear, what we get to know, how we get to research. But that hasn't taken hold at all. I think, and that's part of what I want to share with you. It's coming from a background. It's coming from a background of not just trying to publish just like you and trying to get my ideas there, because these are ideas I believe in, but also being part of a system in personnel review that engage with at the background where people don't see what's happening. You engage with people's write-ups, you engage with their articles, and you get to see why 50 articles are submitted, and all 50 are desk rejected. And some people think there's more to it. Probably there are preferences. There are friends and networks, a cabal, that determines what comes through and who we favor, because everybody probably is not treated the same way. But I got to realize that there are what you call it tricks of the trade, little things that do matter, which people really ignore. Because like I said, before I start sharing my screen, like I said initially, just because you have a nice story to tell doesn't mean anyone is interested in hearing it. In fact, I have been told at one point, I don't belong to your world. I have not experienced what you tell me about, but I'm not convinced. All right. It's almost like saying, I know you say there is air, and so we're alive to breathe it, but I'm not convinced that of the story you tell. So it's same thing. So I'm going to just share my screen now, and hopefully, okay. Okay, and I'll just put it on this mode. Good. So I hope you can see is this visible to everyone?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. Right. So this is about publishing in business and management and insights from the editor. I just scooped a bit there, writing for good academic journals, to provide a kind of focus and specificity. And the reason why I'm dealing with writing for good academic journals is because more and more we are seeing universities talk about interdisciplinarity, the ability of researchers, the ability of management scholars to go beyond just their topics, to assess and harness, other topics and connect their area of interest to that. So we have HRM, or for example, EDI and entrepreneurship and dynamic capabilities and innovation. We're talking about AI, and we're talking about the sociology of work, for instance, where we're even seeing a connection between maybe employment relations and sociology. We also seen, for example, there's a research I was doing on ethnicity and financial inequality. Just something for money and pension service, but that has yielded another research on issues with interventions, inequality in interventions used to address mental health and well-being in the UK. Now, that is not being published in a purely management journal. That's being published in I don't know if you may have heard of it, it's called the Sociology of Health and Illness. This is a 4-star journal, not something that we'll probably look at. It's not something that will appeal immediately to the business and management scholar, but this was a business and management research that is being considered for that journal. And that's not your typical business and management journal, but it's a sociology of health and illness. And we know that there's sociology of work also, which is a purely HR journal, but there are others then. So sometimes our ideas leads us to something broader still, or something nuanced. But interdisciplinarity, the requirement to connect your ideas to others, is the core that's on right now. The broader debate, that connection, those links that are needed for you to transit across fields and areas of interest. So I'll just discuss a few things briefly, and I'll just hope I keep it tight. I'm just going to discuss, some prerequisites to successfully publishing in top journals. Just a few insights, and everything I discuss, I don't just discuss because it is good to discuss it or because, we've got to say something. I say this from that background, being tasked with engaging with papers and having to reject papers, and that was part of my job. And there were bases. There was a basis for rejecting them, not just for the sake of it, but what were those prerequisites? What were those boxes to be ticked? How to anticipate and appreciate the respective audience, the target journal. Every journal has a target audience, and you must be writing to the target audience. Which other small things have to be taken into considerations to make a difference? I'll be talking about that. Let me talk about topic and research question. I'm not going to be able to deal with everything that has to do with a paper, but just this afternoon, I had to write an email to a colleague who had sent a paper to me, and I have changed a few things about the paper, and I will be sharing the abstract of that paper at the end of this presentation, just to allow you see some of the common mistakes that are made. Now, this paper has been rejected several times. It's gone from targeting top star journals like in the 4s to the 3s. And finally, she said to herself, I can't do it. Let me settle for the 2s. And I think this is coming from a misconception that many people have, that journals that are in the 4s and the 3s are probably changing. I mean, those that are in the 2s and 1s are now, playing down on their requirements because they are 2 and 1. Journals that are in 2, CAPS 2 list, want to get to 3 and 4. One of the ways they do that is by being stringent. So I talked to an associate editor once, and he's an editor for a 2-star, a 3-star, and a 4, and in human resource management. And he told me that he doesn't change his requirements when he's reviewing a paper that's in a 2-star from when it's a 4. So it means that many reviewers are like-minded. They review stringently, irrespective of whether it's 3 or 4 or 2, because they're really looking out for the same things. But the reason why that paper wouldn't stand a chance and it's been rejected so much is exactly because of the topic, because of the research question, because of the abstract, and because of the introduction. The front end of the paper is so fundamental that many times over, many associate editors will tell you that if the front end cannot make the case, then the back end can't. All right, so they will reject on the basis of the front end. And so I'm just going to deal with some of these things, those areas here. But there are a few things to keep in mind. What is a successful paper? Do we define this differently as writers from those that are the gatekeepers? Are reviewers unfair? Do journals have requirements that are standard, or do they keep changing? What is a successful paper? A successful paper will address an interesting and relevant topic. That's very subjective. It's got to be interesting. It's got to be relevant. Interesting. What's an interesting topic? Interesting for whom? Relevant for what? Who determines what's relevant? How do I know what's relevant? I have a story to tell. How do I determine who it's relevant for? How do I determine whether it's interesting to someone else? It's interesting to me, but surely I don't know if another person should be interested in this. But is it enough for it to be interesting just to me? What's interesting? One way to connect what's interesting is by going back to the literature. And I'm going to talk about, some of these things. Going to the literature to determine, and going to continuing, for instance, with the current debate that's on, or keying into it. Another thing that you could do about what is interesting is by creating or ripping out a strand from a broader narrative and then running with it. That could be interesting. Looking at things differently or stepping onto the other side. I'll talk about some of those things, hopefully. But the topic that's relevant is what's ongoing in the current debate. Every time and every season, every field has a current debate that's going on. EHRM and AI in human resource management is the key thing that is on now. It used to be sustainability. It used to be climate change, entrepreneurship, innovative capabilities, things like that. But it's moving now. The current debate is on AI and HRM. What's yours? What's the current debate? There are topics that are old. They are old, not because they are not interesting, but for many editors, they're overflogged. And every field has them. They are lying there and nobody wants to touch them anymore. Of course, it has created many people. I mean, people have risen in the ranks based on this, but nobody wants to engage with this in the same way. So they are mainstream. So people talk about critical and post-critical approaches, methodologies. They talk about strategies. These are things that make for interesting and relevant. You identify a relevant question grounded in previous literature. This is important. And identifying a relevant question is quite key and very, very difficult also. So when you identify a relevant question, the issue is, does it capture the theory for some journals? Some journals will require that in your statement, in your research question, that you should capture the theory. Some don't mind, but you have to ask this question in a way that addresses the gap that you have identified. So it's really connected to understanding the literature and where the literature is at. Your arguments have to be reasonable and be presented in a logical manner. So don't make claims. Don't say nothing has been. I always ask that people should use conservative language. So Many times we've had to reject because it was too assertive. Some people think it's confidence, but it's possible. It's possible that you don't know that, maybe some studies have been conducted in the area where you are claiming that nobody has done anything. So maybe the best thing to do is to use conservative language. It's either under scrutinized, or maybe poorly understood, or under researched, or there is limited attention, but you cannot outrightly say. So you use language in a way that is conservative. Of course, you use a good approach, whether quant or qual, to elaborate further, and use theory, which is something that is quite key, but which we have rejected papers also on the basis that the theory was either presented but not utilized, or utilized but not throughout the paper, or it was utilized to a point in the paper but maybe not used eventually at the back end. So theory is not just section in the write-up. More and more we are seeing a requirement that wasn't there previously, or maybe was there but was not so well emphasized. It is the point where we get to. We're now at the point where theory influences how you collect your data and how you analyze it. Now, this is the point where many papers are at. So papers have been rejected because of lack of methodological rigor. And that's not because they didn't say well enough that they use, say, interviews or focus groups or Delphi methods or observations, or maybe especially for qualitative methods, but maybe also that they didn't explain their statistics well enough. But I feel, more and more we're seeing situations where reviewers rather are saying, how did your theory inform your methods? For those that are that do qualitative research, they're asking, how did you validate your instrument? How did you position yourself in the research? What about questions on reflexivity, philosophy, epistemological and ontological arguments related to? So connecting the three, where you connect the theory to the methods and the methods to the philosophy, which is sometimes messy for many people, but a lot of people have found ways to go around it. And I will explain one or two things about that as I progress. The conclusion has to be satisfactory and will answer the research question. Whatever you conclude will be satisfactory. It should address the research question. So part of the reason why papers will be rejected, because the paper is not seen as a successful paper, is because the contribution that is presented has little or no relationship with the question that was asked. It does not engage with the question fully, or it doesn't engage with certain constructs in the question. So when I ask the question and I present my conclusion, there's little relationship. Again, you realize that even when you're writing down your contributions, you write your contribution in order to address gaps. And the gaps, of course, have to be connected to the question. I asked the question out of curiosity because I identified gaps that exist. So I say, why I feel this is not proper, or I feel this is missing. Therefore, I asked myself this question. From this question, I do my research and I apply my methods, and then I find something. And what I find has to be connected to the gaps, all right? And of course, when I make my contributions, it's still got to be connected to the gaps. This is quite important. Of course, scholarly language is something. Now, what I always progress with is very simple, when I'm writing papers, because it can be very, very daunting. It can be very complex. It can be overwhelming. So I always tell myself at the beginning of a paper that I need to say that I'm going to say something, say it, and then say I have said it. That's how simple I think. And that's how I think through a paper. I have something to say. Well, I have said it, and I will tell you, I say I have said it. And really, if you really think through it, this is what it's all about. Now, keep in mind, there will be a demand of you to be original. How original can you really be? Is it true that you can actually bring forth something that is unconnected to any other thing? But then that's not what originality really means. They are looking for an explicit, clear statement of your contribution. And originality here will be your ideas, of course, is connected to other ideas, but what makes it interesting? What makes it novel? What makes it exciting? And I think more and more, we're seeing that being excited about your idea might not be enough, but it might be a good way to start. In other words, you can't be so discouraged about your own idea, not think it's worth it, but you want to sell it to another. There's got to be some passion there. What do you contribute? What do you have to say? The first lines there are things that people usually talk about. They say something no one has ever said before, which is not typical. Usually you say something in a different way, all right? Because, but then when saying it differently, you appear to have created something novel and new, all right? Do empirical work that's not done before, synthesize something that have been put together before, but you put it together differently. You might be engaging with someone else's material ideas, but you are interpreting it in a different way, or you're focusing in a context, country or region. There were years ago, context was enough reason to get you published. Oh, well, this has been done in the UK context. Now I'm doing it in the Chinese context, and that got some attention. These days, it's not enough anymore. The idea of context is so overflogged that it doesn't make an impression anymore. It's not about generalization, but more and more, we are seeing that the reason why many people don't get published is that they're not able to engage with what exists. Therefore, even if you're going to give us a focus on the global South, we need to understand the global North. Research that's been done there, why it's relevant for whom or what, and then why we should be interested in this one. And when you say why we should be interested in this one, you're bringing out those, it's not just enough to say, well, you should be interested because I'm researching the global South. Nobody's done it. You've got to tell us the benefits and why we should be interested. Who benefits? How does it enrich the field? Then you take let me come back to this. Now, you might want to look at topics that people in your discipline have not looked at. So, for instance, I just told you that I investigated financial inequalities among BAME communities in the UK, and I didn't see mental health and well-being coming through. Now, mental health and well-being is coming through that, and we're realizing that there's a connection between financial inequalities and the interventions that are used to address mental health and well-being, and vice versa. Now, what is in the literature is that there is a connection between financial inequalities or a lack of financial well-being and social inequalities. That's in the literature. But now we're seeing that even interventions have implicit inequalities that make their outcomes counterproductive. In other words, they set out to deal with the symptoms, but not the cause, because there are implicit biases even in those interventions. So, for instance, we realize that people of Black and ethnic minority groups are most likely to be the ones that go through maternal deaths. And why? Is it because they are not trained nurses? But there are implicit biases in those interventions. Now, if I look at that stream of research as a business and management scholar, I will have probably looked at the topic as others have looked at it, the connection of financial inequalities to social inequalities. But here we go. There's a stream of research that is not touched yet, or it's not really popular. And so that dealing with what's unpopular in the main is also quite important, looking for those things that are not so popular, because that might just be where you can link up to, hold on to. Give a good exposition of someone else's idea. Some people are good at selling other people's ideas more than those who own it, the owners of the idea. So sometimes reading it and just seeing whether that person has presented in a way that is robust enough, or it has gotten interest, but there is still a stream of this research that I can sell further. So riding on the waves that has been created by someone else is another way to go, and many have done it very well. Of course, continuing an original piece of work is also a part of this. A required checklist for every manuscript and paper what's the phenomenon you're focusing on? The phenomenon you're focusing on, this area of interest, the subject of interest. And why is this relevant? Why is this relevant? What is known and what is not known? This has to come from, of course, a literature review. What do we, and when I bring up the sample of the paper I was talking about, the abstract, probably we'll see part of this. What is known or what is also not known? And what's the core question then that you want to address? What's the purpose of this write-up? What's your intended contribution? When you think your contribution, link it back to what is not known. All right, what is not known? You need to make clear that this is what I have done and how, or maybe your methods, for instance, or the theory that you apply, and this is what I have found, but also what this means. In other words, why is this relevant? Why should we be interested? What does this add, really? What does it add? So sometimes the way people write their contributions is like repeating what is already known. Contributions must be written. Your findings must be written in such ways as to garner interest. And of course, the contributions have to be written in such ways as to also be clarified that this really does add something, because the last question there is, why should anyone care? Really, there are loads of, when I was assistant editor in Personal Review, every week there were about 50 to 70 submissions. Sometimes all were rejected. Sometimes one or two went through, and the associate editors would still accuse me of passing papers that were not robust to them and reject those papers. So 70 papers have been submitted this week. None of them have been sent to reviewers. Now, why? Why should we care about the contributions that you make? And are these things a mystery? I don't think so, because others are still publishing. So there are a few boxes to tick. So the question of so what is really important. So what? Why should we be interested in your paper? I'd like us to look to the far right of your screen there, and that little the verbatim that's there. It drives me crazy when the motivation for a manuscript is because no one has looked at X before. Chances are that no one has ever studied the causal link between managers' favorite cheeses and their leadership style. But that doesn't mean someone should. So I hope you're getting to understand this, that just stating that no one has looked at something, or that it's under scrutinized or underexplored or poorly understood, or has received limited attention, doesn't mean that anyone should be studying it. There's got to be, yes, it has received limited attention, but what are the consequences of this under exploration? And who is losing? What are the benefits if we address this for the field? Stating it just for the sake of it wouldn't get attention at all. Now, let me look at the introduction, just a few words. And remember what I said at the beginning was I'm just going to be looking at the front end. That's what you call it, the front end part of the paper. Like I would exemplify or illustrate later. Look at the abstract, of course, the topic itself, and the introduction. But I'm not going to look at the introduction in the illustration. But right now, I just want to say a few things about the introduction before I come to that illustration eventually. Now, pay attention to your introduction. In truth, and this is real, there are several key things about an introduction. It either makes the paper or it masks the paper. Many reviewers most general editors that will go through papers, and of course, sometimes for papers that are journals that are structured that way, where papers go directly to the editors-in-chief or the editor-in-chief, because there are papers that are that way, or papers that will be moved to an associate editor to check whether it's something we can move forward before. Different papers have different structures, but they don't need to read everything. Many of them don't read everything. In fact, for many of them, there are certain things they look out for in the introduction. Some of them look even to how early you make the case. In other words, there are papers that will insist that the aim of the study, if you have not been able to say the aim of the study in the first 2 paragraphs, short paragraphs, then the paper has not made the case. It's as stringent as that. There are papers that will tolerate you saying, therefore, this paper aims to do something after you've said a load of stuff. All right. But there are papers, most papers will ask, tell me what you want, because they're impatient. They just want to get it over and done with. So they look at your introduction. Have you made the case? And those are some of the things I want to just briefly, it's not straitjacketed, but just a few things there. Make me want to read your paper. Make me in the introduction want to read your paper. Now, there are some papers, some journals rather, that the introduction is so short. In other words, you've got to say what you want to say. You cannot use many words. You've got to say why this paper is relevant, what the literature has been about, what you do, why we should be, what contributions that you make. The research question, of course, should be there. And this is just in a very short, but make me want to read your paper. But a good introduction would tell the story in a nutshell. Everything is there. Just like PhD research, you have chapter 1. When we read your chapter 1, we should know everything about the thesis. We should know the background, the aim, the objectives, the research question. We should know the gaps and contributions. We should know the theory and the methods that apply. And we should know the proposed contribution that you make. Everything is right there. It's in a nutshell. This is also very important there. Now, by just way of advice, talk about the stream of the literature. In fact, I sent a paper once to a general editor in my school because I didn't want to send directly to the journal. And I asked him, do you think this is good enough for your journal? And he wrote back and said, I don't think it's good enough for my journal because I just did a search about whether any of our journals are in your reference list and none of them are. In other words, some journals will want to know whether you cited them or, their articles from the journal are also in your reference list. So they want to know. Incidentally, the ones you cite more for some other journals, the authors you cite much more, a lot on your introduction are the ones that they're going to be seeking out maybe to send your papers for review. They also do that. But the literature itself, you have to engage with the literature, and people engage with dated literature. Recency is quite important because it means that you're up to date. You're up to date with current talks, current debates, really important there. What problem are you trying to solve? I said it in the beginning. Management is all about solving problems. Why should we also care that this problem be solved? Very important too. But how would you solve that problem that you've identified? And this method of yours that you are introducing, how does it differ from earlier approaches? What makes it unique? Again, why should we want to read this? This is important. Then remember in your introduction, and this happens, many journals change over time. And I need to say this, for many that are trying to get papers across, some of them pick up articles that are relevant to the topic. So I want to publish maybe in International Journal of Management. So I pick up 1 or 2 articles that relate to my topic. I always advise people, there are changes in journals. I have once gotten to minor revision with a submission, and it was returned to me and it was changed to major revision. The reason being that the journal had changed its emphasis, changed its editorial, its editors-in-chief, changed its associate editors. Therefore, my good paper that was going for a minor revision in a 4 was suddenly seen as being high risk. It was about to be rejected. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us that when you're picking papers to use as a guide for writing, go for recent papers because they are most likely to reflect the current changes. So you might be dealing with the 2016 paper. That's for an old, defunct editorial board or editorial board leadership at the very least. And so you need to be looking at current papers, and this is quite important also. So to the left and right are things I have already said, just like a reminder, but there are a few guiding questions, just very light touch. What research fields are being addressed? Now, a lot of people say, my paper contributes to the literature. My paper contributes to the literature. The literature around what? The literature on the sociology of work, the literature on human resource strategy or human resource development, the literature on what? Sometimes specificity does matter. And if there is such specificity, it also gives room to consider interdisciplinarity also where it does exist, which could be a strength. Like I said, who cares? Why is the topic important? Remember that the relevance of your study is quite key. So this is just like a recap. The research gap, you need a literature search. And the most common accusation, although that's usually not enough to throw out a paper, is that you have not engaged with current debates or certain papers or relevant research. Some people have accused reviewers of saying they've not engaged enough simply because reviewers wanted their own, their papers to be cited. But that's usually watery argument in the main. The point is that the accusation mostly for literature review is that certain ideas and certain topics have not been engaged with properly. Research question is there for research question, of course, but what about the contribution that the paper makes? Very important there. And how do I proceed to answer my research question? Again, the structure, where you place your arguments, I'm going to show it in the illustration, is quite very, very key also. Now, a few things I would like to say about the journal and the audience. Every journal is not the same. Every journal is not the same. Every journal has its focus. If you're writing your abstract, for instance, there are journals that just want you to say explicitly, right from the first statement, what does your study do? This study does this, explores, examines, investigates something. But there are journals that won't take that. They want you, before you say what your study does, it's got to be situated in the context of an appreciation of what the literature, says. So most studies have done something. However, they've not done some other things. This study then does that. So immediately you have established knowledge of the literature, knowledge of where the literature is at, knowledge of what the literature does and doesn't, and then you've said what your research does, which helps them to connect to these gaps that you've already started to engage with. So very important there. The journal's audience is quite important also, very important. But before I get there, let me also say this. Some journals, in terms of structure, are also quite different. Some will go for exactly what the journal wants to do, the context, maybe the industry that you engage with, the method, and so maybe what you applied, who you interviewed, how many. Then the next thing they want to deal with is what you found. What did you find? What did you find? And that's what they want to know. And the relevance of what you found. What about contributions? That's not important to us. We want to know, what did you find? And why is what you found relevant? But there are journals that want to go, what did you find? But what are your contributions and why are they relevant for whom or what? So you need to, again, like I said, recency, go for current papers that have been published and pick like 3 and look at the structure of the abstract in terms of flow, how ideas are placed. Journals are very conservative. They will not change because of us. They've decided how they want to. So just follow that. How do they place what? All right, you shouldn't be placing what the article does at the end when the journal wants it at the beginning. And sometimes just looking at what others have done is quite important. Who are the journal's audience? The aim and scope of the journal is something you should look at. Who are they targeting? Who do they want to tell the stories to? Do they want to tell it to practitioners, managers that are not academics? Do they want to link theory and practice, or do they just want to deal with theory? Who are their audience? And how should you be speaking? Should you be speaking in very, to a non-academic audience probably, or should you be speaking more? Do they want to make contributions to practice, not just contribution to theory, or maybe just to the literature? Or is it a journal that's really heavy on methodology? Some journals are very thin on methodology. They're very broad about literature and theory. But there are some journals that will almost take the whole journal explaining your methods. They are quite key there. So again, the journal's mission and audience is quite important. The major research areas covered is quite key. So some journals, for example, I noticed about human relations, they will ask that you continue a debate that has already started within the journal, and you identify 3 papers that relate to your topic that you want to advance the discussion that they already started, or that your topic is related to or linked with. This is quite important. So the typical structure of the journal, I've talked about that, but also the methods. Again, I talked about that, how they organize their methods. Some of them are very reflexive. Some of them just want you to report the basic things. They don't want you comparing why you chose interviews or qualitative approach over and above the quantitative approach, and why an interpretivist epistemology or interpretivist paradigm is more important than, say, a social constructionist or constructivist paradigm. They don't want that. They just want a basic report. But there are others that ask the question, how did you position yourself within the research field? How did you see yourself? What about your reflexivity? How did you give us some insight about how you conducted yourself, but also the new things you discovered about the research process? Therefore, everyone uses interviews, and we cannot reinvent the wheel. Some people say there's nothing new in interviewing, but journals keep asking, give us something new. What else? What else? So the interviewing process has become a very, very stringent. Many papers have been pegged, several times returned, because more is asked for in an area that is seemingly repetitive. What else can you say about interviews? When you say that interviews are most likely to yield socially and organizationally desirable responses, for instance, or that individuals are most likely to answer in ways that they think you want them to answer, is that enough? So more and more is being required. Maybe this has to do with people reflecting. And reflection is what makes it different, because everything about interview and their weaknesses and their strengths might just be there, but something, just reflecting on the research process is different for everyone. Everyone's story is different. But more importantly, a lot of people are also beginning to use unconventional, not unconventional, but they are beginning to become more innovative in the way they apply methods. So some people are using photographs and interviews and calling it photo elicitation, or vignettes, short stories and texts and interviews, and calling it vignette elicited interviewing. Now, for many qualitative researchers, they may say 20 is not enough, but once you show robustness in terms of the methods that you use, you get some attention. So some people have been rejected because they say, well, you can't just interview 20 people, but they've been accepted when they showed robustness in the way they applied the methods and the information coming through. That's also quite important. Of course, please, you need to look at each journal's author style guide because they differ. All right, so hopefully let me just run through this. These are small things that make the difference. And like I said previously, pick on an ongoing debate or discussion in the journal. So sometimes you need to read something similar across board and then pick a discussion there. Journals love it when you link back the argument you want to progress to something that has already started in the journal and make it clear that this is what you do. There are specific associate editors that your paper will go to. Why? Because the subject of interest, what you're writing about, has got to be, is their area of interest. So if you're writing on leadership and there's someone who is the associate editor, the board there, who is on his research interest or her research interest on leadership, your paper most likely will go that way. So take time out to look at the interest of the associate editors, because your paper has to go to one of them. Now, look at what interests this editor. Now, you might say, but that's not being objective. I don't want to write the way he writes. But remember, you mark students' work, and it is not true that this is always an objective exercise. Socialization, experience, interests, your bias comes to play. We try as much as possible to make it very objective, but we do know that these things come to play. For instance, if the associate editor's area is leadership, and that editor has used leader-member exchange theory or the social identity theory of leadership, and you're writing and has critiqued shared leadership as an approach to investigating, it is not likely that the editor will not read without some deep scrutiny what you sent to them. This is someone who has presented critiqued, say, shared leadership, and that's what you're using. So I've experienced where, in fact, my first write-up, my very first paper that I submitted, which got Dex rejected, was a paper that was critiquing a theory that was founded by the editors of the special issue I was submitting to, which wasn't very wise, but that was what I was doing. In other words, I was anti their interest. Okay, so that's my point here. Search the editor's research topic and hold on to it, and let your research, target a specific editor's research area, research interest. See what research what they're interested in. It's not that you must change your research to replicate theirs, but it's like appealing to what interests them, because most likely they are going to be the ones reading your paper or moving your paper forward or rejecting it, as the case may be. References from the target journal, very, very important. Good expressions. Some articles have been rejected because of this. Follow the recent structure of articles. I've mentioned that. Very important. Formatting guidelines to the last details. Again, there's some journals will just reject on the basis of formatting. Some will unsubmit. Most are getting to reject these days. A good cover letter saying what is relevant about your paper is always very good. Like I said previously, the introduction and abstract should be 100% convincing. Very important there. And of course, your theoretical and methodological robustness must be clear. I've mentioned that. Not spoken much about theory, of course, but your methods quite important there. Now, just the last few slides. This is just a very practical example of, this is an abstract that you have on your screen there. And the screen is too tight, we're not together, and I'm forced to share, to manage an online kind of classroom. But what you have in the first screen, which you might not have the time to read through, is just the abstract for an article that is targeted at a 3. It has been targeted previously at a 4, but after several rejections, the person started targeting 3 and has also now started targeting 2. But the reasons for the rejections were not given. The journal simply said, your paper does not make robust contributions. Okay, your paper does not make robust contributions, and so we cannot continue. We're rejecting. All right. So this is International Joint Venture Social Control Design, evidence from an emerging market, IJV. Now, what I did in this slide, arguably the last slide, is I looked at the abstract of the paper. This individual was so convinced that this paper should sell. All right, but what was wrong? Why has this been an unsuccessful paper? International joint ventures. Now, what the colors, the highlights that I have used is everywhere that something is wrong. Everywhere that something is wrong. Now, this is not the introduction. This is the abstract. And arguably, the reason for rejection is because the abstract does not make the case. It doesn't make the case. There are too many things that need to be done. What I've done in the little blue boxes there is to highlight some of the things that just could be wrong, starting with the title. The title needs to be more informative. International Joint Venture Social Control Design, Evidence from an Emerging Market IJV. Doesn't say anything. It doesn't say anything. Now, I've suggested some of the, maybe some, just suggestions of some other topics that, some way to write the title to make it more informative. Social Control Design in Emerging Market International Joint Ventures, Insights from a Zambian Chinese Case Study. All right? Navigating Social Control in Emerging Market International Joint Ventures, a Zambian Chinese Perspective, or Culture Adaptation and Trust Building, Unraveling Social Control in Emerging Market IJVs. This might not be the perfect topics. It's not my paper. But someone reviewing, maybe like me, will not find this topic very informative, very constructive, and arguably, this is indicative of what's going to be in the rest of the paper. Now, the other one is how the paper starts. Does it matter how you start your paper? You cannot start with a typo. And there is a typo in the very first sentence there. So proofreading comes through, but that's not even the issue in the main. Rather than start with just the relevance of control, for instance, in this paper, my suggestion is that this person should start with what previous research has done. So making the first statement about maybe what previous research has done, all right, that should be important. Why is this necessary? If we don't know what previous research has done, how do we know the relevance of what your research seeks to do or will do or does? If you look at the paper, the aim is too simple. The aim is too simple. And I want to look at the aim. It says, this study aims to explore the collaborative dynamics between emerging market and parent firms and the international joint ventures in shaping social control. So the core thing that it does is to examine the factors. Is this okay? If you want to explore the collaborative dynamics between, first and foremost, I insist that the use of the word dynamics is vague. Rather use maybe interactions. Interactions may be collaborative interactions between emerging markets, parent firms, and international joint ventures in shaping social control. But why is shaping social control relevant? Why is it relevant? The case for why social control is relevant and why we should be interested in this should have been established in the text before this. All right? So, and this has to do with, again, what previous research does. So when I said the aim is too simple, because we don't know the context. We don't know what previous research has done. And we don't even know why we should see this aim as relevant. Why? Because a gap has not been established previously. So it's better to state it in terms of what research has done, but what is left to be done, or what is important but has not been done. And therefore, this is what my research does, which will help us to appreciate the relevance of your research. Now you're beginning to sell. Now, going back, still some of the box there said semi-structured interviews were applied, but and then observations also, but semi-structured interviews of whom and observation of what? Now, there is something about the theory. The writer says, drawing on the social exchange theory, but we do not know, and this is something that I need to say quite carefully, there is no connection in the text before and the text after with the social exchange theory. It seemed as if it was inserted there for the sake of it. Now, how do you engage theory or show connection to theory? Before you will write drawing on the social exchange theory, there has to be, you invoke certain words that connected to social exchange. Social exchange has to do with interactions, collaborations. It's transactional. It's an exchange. So the best thing is to use those synonyms up there so that when you say drawing on the social exchange theory, it becomes almost like natural that social exchange should be used. Someone can connect the theory just by the name of the theory to some other things that you've been talking about. But there is no connection before and there's no connection after. Literally, there was nothing that was done with the theory other than mention that it was drawn from in the abstract itself. When you look, and so let me round this up now. So when you look at the way that theory was used, like I said, it's unconnected, absolutely unconnected. Now, if you look at the findings, this write-up stops with the findings, but that is not enough. Where are the contributions? If I cannot say what the contribution is and why the contribution is relevant, in other words, why should we care? I've not made the case. So there is no, like I said, the problematics is missing, the gaps is missing. The relevance of the findings, therefore, is hanging in the air. You cannot say what you found, and we cannot see why it's relevant, except you've established some context. What are the gaps there to be filled? In other words, you cannot just say your finding was relevant. You've got to connect the relevance of the findings to the gaps that you identified. Really important there. So which field does the study add to, and what problems does it address, and how? So we don't see contribution. That's the point I'm trying to make. We don't see, the person stops at finding. And so it's been rejected in 3, 4 stars, rejected in 2, 3 stars, and now the target is on 2. But the basics for a business management journal is not there. And the boxes to be ticked are not far-fetched. They're right there. All that's needed is to address these, and what you have is a very robust abstract that's ready to go. And if you reflect these changes, if this individual is to reflect these changes in the introduction, again, you have a word introduction. Of course, I can't share the introduction, but it's reflective of exactly how this abstract stands. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very, very much,
Okay.
Dr. Ume, for that insightful, thought-provoking, inspirational, eye-opening presentation. Right, to the audience, any questions, please feel free to ask Dr. Ume any questions you may have relating to, this topic. You can either unmute yourself and ask the question directly, or you can text it in, you can type it in the public chat section, and I'll pick on that and read it out for Dr. Ume to respond. Thank you.
Imran wants to ask a question, I think.
Yes, Imran, over to you, please.
Thank you, Professor. Very insightful indeed. So I just wanted to, we know this very well, but I just wanted to get your emphasis on this, that the role of collaborating with colleagues, how important is that?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Collaborating with colleagues, Imran, is quite key. I advise that. I think what has happened over time is that for many colleagues, they've tried to run alone. They've tried to drive their ideas on their own. For instance, the lady that I just shared her abstract has been on this for like 2 years, and she's been on it alone. Now, I'm her colleague, but she just sent it to me, and I was able to make this input. It means that collaborating with me on this paper it mightn't get it to the destination. We might need people like Lawrence to come into the paper, but it drives, it progresses it. It's really, really key. It brings in expertise, but Imran, also it has problems. There are challenges. So who you collaborate with does matter. There are loads of people that just want to tag along. There are people that just want to be, they need to be carried along, just like join the bandwagon, not ready to put in anything. So there might be 4 authors on a paper, and the paper keeps getting rejected because there is one author that's doing the job, and the other people are just hangers-on, that you might call them. If you want to collaborate, there's got to be a definite understanding about how each person adds to this. So collaboration is not always beneficial. Sometimes it ends with disagreements and sometimes a lot of pain. So who are you collaborating with? And are the terms of this engagement, just like marriage, is it very clear right from the beginning? And are people keeping on to it? And not to be afraid to tell someone out that you cannot be part of this because you are not adding to the you are a weak chain, or you're affecting us negatively. The other thing I want to say about collaboration is like I said, some people think also that maybe if I were to join Param Budwa because he's a very highly cited author in HR, maybe if I should put him in, maybe my stuff will get published faster. I think for some people, things like that have worked. And so I talked to a professor once who said to me, well, I could join you because if you were to make me the corresponding author, nobody wants to reject a professor because that professor might just be sitting down on your interview panel, and everyone laughed about it. But in truth, some of those kind of stuff seem to have been, it makes the case. Who are you adding on? Some of them are the face of your paper. They don't do much, but their inclusion does get attention. It will determine your paper being cited. It will determine downloads, which will have has impact factor implications. So the paper will enjoy that. So making collaboration is very strategic with colleagues, yes, but remember, everyone has to have something definite that they want to play there, and each person must be moving the paper forward, not just hanging on. Right? I hope this addresses some of your question, Imran.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. May. And I think there is another question related to the question Dr. Imran just asked a moment ago, and that is from Aliza. Aliza is asking, how can we find opportunities of collaboration?
Okay, Aliza, I can see Stella raising hands, so I'll answer Aliza first. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
The opportunities for collaboration are staring you in the face every day. They're right there with you. I think a core thing is the interest, firstly. So areas that you're interested in that align with others. And some people have gotten a wind of this. So at every point, I might join Imran and Lawrence and maybe Professor Harrison, so that we are maybe 4 at some point that are writing, but each of us are dealing with separate ideas around the same topic, for instance. So collaboration sometimes goes beyond just I doing the work and dragging others in. It also has to do with how I'm spreading out. Networking is very key. I learned this quite late because I am a solo runner. So I write on my own. I enjoy my ideas and I sleep with them with a smile. But I realized that I might not go too far publishing as I would want to, except I get involved with other people's ideas. And I think I'm faster now, have papers that are there in revision more than ever, because I am not just, I'm writing, right? But they are writing also. I'm involving them in my paper and they're involving me in theirs. Are we all collaborating? Yes, we're collaborating. But it's staring you in the face. The first thing to identify is interest. Now, interest, the second is purpose. What's this person's conviction? Some people are not interested in being promoted. Some people are just interested. I've seen people who said, I'm just okay where I am. All right. The school had to invite them to apply for promotion, but you might want to move further, maybe for several reasons. Maybe you want to reward yourself for sacrifices that you've made over years, or maybe you have an ambition or a career plan, but everybody has it different. You don't want to stick to someone who is just not ambitious. Interest and purpose matters. Convictions matter also. So a discussion will align you with who you should actually be collaborating with. But it will amaze you that if you call up a colleague, for instance, or look up a colleague's research interest, people walk into my office, and I do the other way around too. And I say, I'm doing a paper. Do you want to put me, do you want to be on it? So you be the peer reviewer. Review this brutally as if you were the devil's advocate. Okay, so just do this. That's your job. But I've had to look up people's areas of interest and been able to contact them. But in speaking with them also, I realized what they are, the kind of person they are. Just because that person has an area of interest doesn't mean that person is passionate or that person is aligned to your own goals. So you might find out, like someone told me last night, I sent something to this individual and it takes 3 months before it comes back. And when it does come back, there's nothing in it. It's just two lines. And I'm collaborating with this person. That's not a collaborator. That's a dream killer. And so you got to, it's important. Interest, purpose, and passion. Very important. Okay.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, over to you, Stella. You can unmute yourself, please.
Thank you so much. Just first to say that this is really insightful and helpful to me. But I'm a PhD student, and just listening to everything that's being said, I'm wondering, oh, am I in the right place? And I'm like, yes, I am. I'm getting to the end of my second year doing my PhD, but I'm really, really interested in writing and publishing. And, you know, I've gotten like varied kind of advice. Some are saying, oh, it's too early. You wait until you finish your PhD. Others have said, oh, you're on the right track. But the first thing that I wanted to ask is one which you have addressed, is that whole thing of collaboration. So I've got advice from some people saying it's better to do it on your own. And other people are saying, no, collaborate because it's the first time. What do I know? But the difficulty is really finding people to collaborate with. And I know what you've just explained there is there are people. I work with UWS as an associate lecturer where Professor Harrison just left. If you're new, if you're the new kid on the block, it's difficult to see anybody that really wants to work with you. That in itself is a problem. The other question that I have really is this kind of, well, I say divide or the difficulty of knowing, do I want to work along the lines of my research, my PhD thesis, or do something slightly different and publish something slightly different? Just taking on from what you have said, that whole area of multidisciplinary thing. I have a few things that I've put down, like just doing a mind map in the last few weeks, which is why I came for this today in itself. I still have that confusion of if I'm doing something totally different, it will be time consuming for me. That's where I'm needing that kind of, you know, what's your take on that? Doing something completely different from my PhD or sticking to that? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Stella. Let me, doing something for your PhD, let me go back to your first question, especially the one that has to do with collaboration. And a good way to start might be your supervisors. Really a good way to start. But of course, not every supervisor is very keen on moving in that direction. I've seen a few, and some of them, their relationship with you is simply just to do with the PhD, and that's the size of it. But again, they could direct you to, or you could walk into doors, or you could send emails out. Most supervisors or most academics are not interested in intention. They want to see something that is tangible, and then they can move with it. Something that that they can dwell on, something really material. So seeing someone who is passionate, or seeing someone who expresses the intention to, or the will, is not just enough. So have you written something that you can send to them and say, this is what I have in mind, and this is a draft, and then they can move on from there. I've seen this with many. Something material might make the difference. So that's just an advice. Your supervisors first, but again, if you're discussing with your supervisors, you are discussing something that you are putting down. Not just put it down and then send it on to them. If they do not express interest there, then walk into doors or ask for advice, or ask them who you might be able to talk to, who might be interested in this idea, or talk to colleagues. All right, talk to colleagues off the hook. Talk to colleagues about it and ask, and they can point you in the right direction. Again, that is quite key. Now, there's another question you asked within that about timeliness. Is it the right time to be doing publications? Now, in many other parts of the world, the traditional PhD is not what goes on anymore. It's PhD by publication. People are publishing and getting by. And that the beauty about that is by the time they're done with their PhD, they have some papers that have been published, and then they are ready for the job market because they're even more competent in the job market because they have been able to publish. Now, when is the right time? As far as I will advise this, your supervisors will say, stick to your PhD, try and finish your PhD. But I've seen many people who were able to juggle them. People's circumstances are different. And you know, the way people take pressure is also different. But what I will advise is that in a PhD, there's so much in there. In a PhD, there's a conceptual paper, a theoretical paper, a literature review, an empirical piece, a research note, a methodological piece, a provocation piece. There are so many things within a PhD that a PhD can churn out. Question is, which one do you really want to play at different times? What I've realized is that for some people, and I see this with many academics, every research that they do, they publish a note, 2,500 words, not 8 to 10,000 like the others, 2,500 words of some insight into a methodological insight, and it sells. I've seen somebody publishing this over and over again in Top 4 and TradeStars, and it sells. This is from PhD, methodological insights. So I think one of the things I can advise you, Stella, is begin to put your ideas down. But to put your ideas down, you've got to have a topic, and you need to have a focus, and you need to have a target journal. Don't just write for the sake of it. Is there a journal you're looking at in terms of structure, messaging, the aims and scope of that journal? Don't be in a hurry. The fact that you have that in mind is enough. Start putting it down. Whenever you have a little time, revisit or do a timetable, a time you dedicate to just building this, and have some sample articles from the target journal where you use to structure your ideas and read further. Of course, when you check their references, they will lead you to other references. So the issue of literature review is not really there. It makes a great case when you say, when you say that I have published before starting maybe before your Viva, or you have something in revision or something in review. It's a very strong statement of the quality of research that you have done, even before your examiners begin to really look at your work, and determines sometimes their disposition towards it. Now, you asked the last question. So what was that? What was that last question?
No, I was asking if I think you've kind of covered it, like doing something entirely different, like writing maybe a small piece that's different from my piece.
All right. So what I would advise is this: follow what you're really passionate about. I hate maths. If you told me to come write something on mathematics or calculation, I wouldn't like it. Doesn't mean I don't know how to do stuff there, but it's not my area of it's not my area of strength. I like something I'm excited about the next day, and that is qualitative research. So my point is that that's my passion. Follow what you're passionate about. Follow what you're passionate about. Interdisciplinarity is very good. It's ambitious. There are two streams of thought. There are those that will tell you that you need to build expertise. You need to be known for an idea. You can't be known for every idea. Some will even argue that you can't deal with every theory. In other words, what they call theoretical promiscuity, jumping from one theory to another. You need to have one theory, celibacy, they call it, theoretical celibacy. Just stick to one theory, and that's what you're known for, an idea you're known for. So when we talk of EDI or something about EDI, maybe vignettes, methodologies of researching EDI, we call your name. They say that. But I think things are changing. In York, the management school has been changed and integrated because they are talking about the connection between the school and society. And not just dealing with business and management, but society also, solving societal problems. And that's why they are driving people like me, who researches HRM, towards other areas and bringing individuals together. So interdisciplinarity is fine, but you need to proceed from an area of strength. In other words, you cannot just start connecting everything. You've got to proceed from something that you've got to connect to other things. So what my advice is to build on the area that you're passionate about and where your strength really lies, something you already know much about. And then from there, move on to connect. That's my advice.
Wow, fascinating. Thank
much.
you very much for that. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Yeah, Aliza is asking another question.
Okay.
Sorry for another question, Aliza. You don't have to apologize. We like questions. A lot of high impact journals charge application processing charge. Is there any feasible way to publish in good impact journals at reasonable or no cost?
Yeah, sure. Imran, did you want to react to that? Or
Of course.
okay.
So I'm sure this is applicable to all universities. So we have at Bolton a contract with publishers. So they will pick up the application processing charge, which might run into thousands. And we advise our student not to pay any money before consulting me or the library. And I'm sure you would advise the same, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that answers it. I mean, you have both. I mean, for many journals, for many schools, they have like my school does pay for open access. Yes, because that's the. I mean, my first publication, I would have liked it to go open access because you know, you receive more citations there. Your work is available across. I mean, many friends from Nigeria tell me they don't have the money. Their school is not paying for subscription, and they would like to see some of those articles. But the processing fee, the fees, it's crazy if you want to really pay that. And thankfully, in Bolton, you have this in place. You know, this facility, this structure in place where you don't have to. So I'm sure, is it Eliza who asked the question?
Aliza.
Eliza, so this is some information for you. You don't have to pay that there. And many good journals still don't. I mean, they go the hog, but they don't take that money for. There are also, of course, what do they call it? Implications for the ref. In the ref circle, without the proper structure in place, without your school having that payment in place, that facility in place, if you were to put up your paper on open access and probably make the payment, it might not qualify the paper for the ref. So one has to be really careful about how you take up like open access. Even though you expended money, it might not be something that counts for you. And schools want your publications to count. It's a very serious matter because it adds to their impact factor in the ref. Okay, so really important there. Thanks, Imran. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I can see Imran has put something transitional agreement lookup. Yeah, that's right. So you need to, I think it's really important to check the kind of arrangement, you know, that your institution has in place. And I think this varies from institution to institution. Yeah. Any other question?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Yes, Andrew, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much, Professor Chidoze, for the brilliant presentation. We have benefited quite a lot.
Thank you.
My quick question is, you know, ChatGPT is one example for artificial intelligence. So
Yes.
what is your advice to researchers when it comes to doing research vis-a-vis ChatGPT use?
Thanks. It's an ongoing thing, and eventually, in my opinion, the way this is going on within publishing houses, because I'm in the background there, and you hear discussion and attend meetings with publishers like Emerald, where Personnel Review, the publishers for Personnel Review. So an ongoing discussion is how to deal with the issue of AI, like chat. I don't know if you've noticed, for those who have, because my students, we've just yesterday I was in a meeting in the Board of Studies, and this was exactly the discussion. Somebody was proposing, for instance, that we change the way we assess students, because the way we assess them now, take-home exams, it's not, when we're not testing knowledge. They just put it in there and bring out what they need to. And some of them have learned how to constructively use it. And another debate that came through is whether we are saying no to it. And I think the consensus is we're not saying no to it. And we are saying that students can use it, but they can't use it. There are bars and there are boundaries. The question then arose, what are those boundaries that we need to set? Are there policies that we need to deal with here? I see that in the future, we are still, many people who became top shot in the academia, some of their works are being passed through Turnitin, and they're getting to see that those works were not originally there. Some of them are being forced to resign from positions, and some of them from top government jobs, etc. I think there will come a point where AI will be something like that, where already Turnitin has that function, but it's not perfect. But that shows you that some of these things will eventually be dealt with. Am I against AI? Publishing houses have warned against it. They have said that you should not use it, but they use very careful language to suggest that they are not implying that you cannot use it to research, you cannot use it to even rewrite your term, but in the end, they say that's rewrite your sentences, for instance, your paragraphs, but that in the end, you need to own it. Now, many people do several things. They turn it in there, and then they take it to a copy editor or a proofreader to see whether they can use their own words to change it around. I don't think that works. What I have seen from the students who have written with it, and in fact, today I saw a reviewer. We had an issue. Somebody had been accused of writing with chat. And because the writing was so, the way chat writes, it was so soulless. That's the word. And they were saying determine editors whether this is something that we should move forward. This seems to be something that was written with AI. And everybody was looking at the paper, but I realized that the reviewer had used chat to give the reviews. Okay, so, but my question was, is that supposed to be an issue there? Because of the way, in fact, the review was not a review. It was a description of the review. So it was almost like this person wrote a review, put it onto chat, and chat started to describe the review process, really explaining what the person has said. And without thinking, the person copied it and pasted it there and then went away. So what we had was a description of what he had written rather than an explicit direction. Even explaining what the review process was about was part of the write-up, including in conclusion, like chat always writes in conclusion, because it's something that I think I encourage everyone to get to use in order to understand what the limits are, because there are also potentials there. You can really get information better than Google. It's fast. You can't trust everything. It's very bad for referencing, for instance. I've had to study it, use it, over and over again in order to determine when my students have been using it to write, because I can just, if I read, I know right immediately whether you're using this. It's so plain. The only thing that one can do really is maybe a good copy editing can make changes. So where are we headed really with this? Part of the reason why it's getting more and more difficult, in fact, it's taking longer. In Personal Review as assistant editor, I had only 7 days to check submissions to decide whether they were going to be rejected or whether they're going to be accepted. I made a submission to Work, Employment and Society, and it took 5 weeks to get that done. And when I approached one of their editors and I said, this is absolutely unprofessional. This is not how your paper will move forward. Don't be surprised that one day you go back to 3-star. Now that you're glorying in 4. And he laughed and said to me, every paper is going through this. The submission has gone through the roof. And papers are trying to cope. Most of them are AI. People think that they can get things through with AI, but I will advise it's really not working. Okay? It's really not working. I think where people have gotten things through is where they have used it constructively. Those that use it to rewrite, maybe for grammar, or they try to use it to write sentences well, to make connections and to present something for it's so, I don't know how to put it there. There is something that's missing in the way, a kind of mechanical communication that doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have that. It's too straightforward, too stringent, too straitjacketed. If you have to write with it, you've got to own it. And to own it means rewriting it for yourself. All right? Rewriting it for yourself. So I think those are things. And I think academics should be wary, because the future is that most works that have gone through chat will be called up again and there will be problems. there will be problems. Just like they're calling up work that has been plagiarized. For years, it wasn't an issue. Now it's an issue because there are questions on originality. Who owns it? Is it not fraudulent to claim that this is your work when it was written by through artificial intelligence, through a program? There are questions on the ethics itself. And this comes down to even pedagogy. What do we communicate to our students? And what is our philosophy? What do we believe? So there are deeper arguments here and deeper narratives, and it goes beyond just trying to present something. And people, and this will eventually come to play. So what I feel is that people, even if you have to err in the side of caution, in other words, like they say it, I think it's better to stay on board. And there are different things that that we've discussed. So let me put this as a final to this. One of the things I didn't talk about is how you get really your papers across with less likelihood of rejection. One of the things I've learned to do is to send the paper to someone who has reviewed for that particular journal, even one of that, or to send it to someone who has reviewed for a sister journal or another journal that has that focus. Now, there are several things. Some of them will want to review it. They will take time. So usually I send to several. I might send to 4. Once 2 comes back, I forget the other 2 because they might not come back to you for 6 months and you can't wait. But there is another stuff there. Some of them will want to become co-authors. It's fine because a first author of an unpublished article is many steps behind than a 4th author in a published one. So but my point is that you want to get your paper out there. That's most important, not glory that I'm first author and it's not getting published. So it's really key there. If you can send to someone who you know, and if you look at the editorial board, you will see reviewers and you will see their schools. You might be shocked that somebody in your school is a reviewer for the journal that you're targeting, or is connected to somebody who is a reviewer. So sending it there, they understand what's being required. They decrease, it decreases the chances. Some of those things that reviewers will pick on, and for those reasons, they reject the paper. They will point these things out to you early so that you can address it, and it does increase the chances of you getting published barring Dex rejects per se. But that's just by the side. I just wanted to connect that. Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Umeh.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. I think we have to run up for today. Can I just say, on behalf of the Center for Leadership and Empowerment, a big thank you to our speaker, to Dr. Umeh for this fantastic presentation. I think I have learned a great deal, and I'm pretty sure everyone in attendance will echo the same sentiment. Thank you so much for taking off time, your busy schedule, to share your insights and perspective on this very interesting topic. Remember, today the mantra is publish or perish. And I think if we can take on board some of the ideas and insights and views that Dr. Umeh has shared with us today, and act on that, I'm pretty sure we'll be headed in the right direction. Thank you so much. A big thank you to our audience as well, all who are in attendance from different parts of the world. Thank you so much for taking time off your busy schedule to be part of this meeting session. And a big thank you to our director, Professor Harrison, who has made this a reality. A few months back, we wouldn't think of having such a session, such a seminar series. But I think it's a reality thanks to the ingenuity and innovation and drive and passion and enthusiasm of our director, Professor Harrison. Yeah. Yes, Dr. Imran, please.
Quickly, Lawrence, can we have a show of face, please, everybody, so we can take a screenshot and we can do a bit of publicity of this event?
Absolutely, absolutely. Please, everyone, if you can just unmute yourself and open your video, that would be fantastic. So we can capture this moment, because
Andrew's getting ready.
Yes.
Yeah, I need to take my jump off.
Oh no.
Right.
Wonderful. I'm not marketer, but I'd like to market. You know,
Right,
this is
yeah.
such a wonderful event.
Yes. Thank you so
Um,
much. Yeah, everyone, please.
So
I
I
think
will.
just to add to what everybody has said, I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
I would
we
like to say
can.
thank you to, of course, Dr. May for the fantastic presentation. We found it very useful. You dissected everything
Thank you.
about publishing. Hopefully, we'll have you in Bolton very soon. So that would be great to meet you in person. And thanks
Thank you.
everybody for attending. Thanks, of course, Lawrence for leading on this. It's been great. It's an amazing seminar series. And thanks everybody that has also made it possible. It's great to have many people that have benefited from the fantastic presentation by Dr. Ome. It was great. And I think we have all benefited from it.
Mashood, if you can stop moving, I'll take your picture.
Watch this space on the 14th of December. Another fantastic seminar to come. But thanks everybody for attending, and definitely we'll catch up soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mashood, can I have you in the frame? Yes, thank you. There. Yeah. Okay. So this is gonna for a screenshot. Everybody, just look up, please. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Please,
Thank you.
for updates on our future sessions, please follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, okay? And just to reiterate what Dr. Harrison said, the next session, the next seminar series is on the 14th of December, and that will be the speaker for that will be none other than our director himself, Dr. Harrison, and the topic will be entrepreneurial leadership. So thank you very much once again for your contribution, for your engagement, for being part of today's session. Enjoy the rest of your evening and looking forward to our next session. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.